I thought it was more interesting. I used to work with very small portable cameras, and then I moved on to a 5.4, and everything was upside down and back to front. And being dyslexic, that was like perfect. It made total sense to me. So it was like suddenly my life became clear. The title of the show is about traces, and traces can be literal, where you physically see the traces, the impression on the space, or it can be metaphysical, sort of the hint of a previous incarnation. With this particular one, this is the Cava, which is in the mountains above Vicenza, and it's an old stone quarry that's been expanded. It's been turned into like a venue, and it's just a very, very powerful space, and it was quarried for over 100 years, and it's left, very overt traces of time on the walls. You can look at them on different levels. I think if you were a mason, you'd be able to judge the time by the different stone techniques. I think in the same way you can age a tree by the lines on the trunk. You can probably age this space by the techniques used.
On this occasion, we decided to take this space for 3 weeks before Christmas to do justice to Edmund Sumner's work, and we set up this exhibition, Traces, showcasing his work. The thing about Edmund was when we first got together and he showed me this work a few years ago, I was immediately struck by one thing, that it's never just buildings or interiors with Edmund. It's what he does really, that grabbed me, is he creates aesthetic histograms that really capture traces of the spirit of the history embedded in buildings.
I love those boots.
Thank you so much.
They are so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. These two are a series from a cemetery in Japan designed by the British architect David Chipperfield. This is the Inagawa Cemetery, and I've titled this picture Inagawa AM, Inagawa PM, and similar views off the same corridor. But for me, sort of after the pictures, it took on a greater meaning. You've got PM, which is obviously towards the evening, AM in the daytime, but somehow there's more meaning for me in them. I think when you look at this, you think about what is on the other side, and you think about the nature of the project. You think about what's around the corner, what's going to happen, what's going to go on afterwards. So, yeah, I think that's the power of these particular pictures. I try and not have favorites in projects that I've photographed or images I've taken, but if I did, these would be quite high up there, really. I'm rather proud of these.
My name is Stefan Schmidt. I run Album Gallery, and Edmund Sumner is one of the artists we work with. In fact, we've been working with Edmund for a number of years now, going back to just some time before COVID. And it's terribly exciting and rewarding to do this exhibition here, this residency here in Portobello Road with Edmund. And I'm personally looking very much forward to the talk. I'm also incredibly chuffed, privileged and grateful to welcome here Brandei Estes, who's going to talk to Edmund. And who could be more qualified to do so than Brandei? Brandei, many of you might know, until very recently was the director of photographs for the EMEA region and Sotheby's. Their loss, she's gone longer. And she's a very formidable player in our world. And so with that, let me hand over to Brandei and Edmund. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I've worked for 20 years in photography, and I'm incredibly passionate about it. And it's so lovely to see so many new faces who are here. to engage with us and listen to Edmund talk about his work, which for me, I have one of the works here in the show. I might tell you after which one, but I particularly love Edmund's work and practice, and we met a few years ago online on Instagram and connected, and then met in person when Stefan and Album Gallery brought his work to Unseen in Amsterdam. So this is really wonderful to have this solo exhibition here in London, and to again have you all here and to listen to the work. So some of the people here know you, but I think some don't. So it would be great to start talking a bit about, just to put into context, how you arrived at being an architectural photographer, and we'll move on to what we see in the work and what the work is really about. And we'll save some time for questions at the end as well. So keep those in your pocket until I indicate when. Thank you. So,
Great. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Stefan, and thank you for Brandei. And I immediately, the fact that you've been in photography for 20 years kind of confirms to me the sort of power of creative serendipity. It's very much how I've always thought. I've no formal training in photography or architecture, but most of my family were architects or designers of that sort. So whereas most people sort of grew up with, I don't know, Hello or Sunday Times in the bathroom, I had sort of magazines like Domus and Architectural Review. And I was always interested in photography. And so at a later stage in life, I decided I started working as a photography assistant. And as soon as I did that, things just sort of started to sort of fall into place.
Well, we talked a bit about this yesterday, how I think I have to remind myself every day, don't just take a photo for face value. There's so much more that goes into it, that's behind it, the meaning, the message.
But then this hunk of a building had been left, and it had become a sort of impromptu memorial, but become a memorial to a lady called Mickey Endo. Now Mickey Endo was a 29-year-old municipal worker, and her job was to monitor for incoming tsunamis and to warn the town. And the story is, I mean, you can see the sort of ferocity of what the storm did. The story is she was last seen on the roof, manning the megaphones and sort of warning.
And we've talked about, and you've mentioned now, that your own response to the landscape, and that it's a feeling, it's a sensibility, and how interesting that all of these places where you have shot these works, Japan, India, Mexico, are places where you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
You don't speak the spoken or written language.
I think it's more than just not speaking the language. Also, I'm an outsider.
Culturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an outsider, so I'm looking at things a little bit differently. And if you can't speak the language in a place, you kind of you zone out in a little way, and you I think they say when one sense is dimmed, the others sort of get stronger. So I think with that space, it was a very, very powerful space, and to be honest, I can't really remember exactly the thought process I went through when I was making that series of pictures, but I think that's also very much how I work. There's this process I talk about with young photographers, and I talk about the idea of keeping soft eyes. And by that, what I mean is that so many people think, okay, right, I'm going to go now, I'm going to get a burnt out building, I'm going to get a cracked window, and I'm going to get a tank coming down. And they have that thing so hardwired, and they go and they sort of try and find that image. And the same thing sort of happened during COVID. Everyone was thinking, right, okay, what's the zeitgeist? What's the image? And everyone was thinking it was about empty streets and empty buildings or empty. And actually, I just found that really, really, really boring, because I always imagined them as being empty. I mean, so the idea is that with soft eyes, you don't over-focus on one thing, and you just let other ideas sort of bubble up in the background. And for me, with COVID, what it was about chalk. and pavements. So when I was a kid, I grew up in West London. It was all about street play. Kick a ball around or chalk on the pavements. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but during COVID, that came back in a big way. And then there were all these wonderful chalk tracers and, people. So I started sort of documenting chalk around London.
But again, I'm coming back to traces. We're talking about these works that have expressed an emotion. It's something that you're interested in, that sensibility. For me, I find, not with all photographers, but a lot of photographers, I look at their work and see them in self-portrait. They're really expressing their own personal views or what they want to communicate. And I think perhaps
maybe
this show is the self-portrait of you.
Yeah, maybe I'm a hippie who really wants to be a war photographer, but it didn't quite work out.
And we're grateful for it because you brought something else to the table.
Thank you.